Good afternoon. I am Lori Hudson, your Director of Operations here at National REIA. And we thank you for joining us for our November REIA Now update. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. And a special thank you to all of our veterans, as today is Veterans Day. We also want to thank our broadcast sponsor, Home Depot Pro, where we have special discounts, 20% off paint, exclusive discounts through the Home Depot app, and a 2% rebate that is mailed out twice a year. Here's our disclaimer that we have to put in there. A little bit about National REIA. We have been serving the real estate investors since 1985. We have over 120 local chapters and associations across the U.S. and serve roughly about 40,000 members. And our job is to help protect and educate real estate investors across the U.S. Get in contact with your local REIA. We have two ways, because I like multiple ways of doing things here. You can click the little I'm an investor icon, and then they'll pop up this menu and click on find a REIA, or find your local REIA up in the top hand menu. Usually we have a legislative update. We are still working on that as there's many things going on. So our agenda is shortened today. So we have our member spotlight from the Real Estate Journal Fall 2025. You should have received in our mail, I believe, at the beginning of the month, maybe. So we have Brad, who is our Director of Communications, and then one of our members from Boston REIA joining us today. So I am going to go ahead and stop my screen share and toss it over to you, Brad.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brad Beckett with National REIA. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Anthony Maggio. And as Lori just said, every issue of the Real Estate Journal, which the fall issue just came out, every issue features a REIA member from across the country, a real estate investor, a real person, someone who's out there doing it, who's made it happen, who's been there, done that. And in the fall issue, we had the pleasure of having Mr. Maggio, who was from the Boston REIA. And let me put my glasses on real quick. Anthony Maggio is a seasoned entrepreneur and active wholesaler in the greater Boston area. He launched his first business at the age of 23 and has built and sold multiple businesses during his 15 years in the food service industry and 15 years in the sales and distribution of commercial offset printing supplies. He's an active member of the Boston Real Estate Association. But those aren't the cool things. He's got some really interesting stuff going on. But he's also got an interesting past, as you can see, including running food trucks. Mr. Maggio, tell us a little bit about yourself, other than what I just said, and how you got involved in real estate.
I will, Brad, and thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. It's a different twist to what I normally do day to day, huh?
Yeah.
That's for sure. How did I get started in real estate? I've always had just a love for the smell of new construction. I like to frame it in that context. I started getting involved with real estate actually back in the late 80s. I was involved with a new build that I was involved with in Woburn, Massachusetts. And then there were a couple of projects along the way. Back in 2017, I dovetailed this into my estate support service business, which links directly to the real estate, right? So back in 2017, we tragically lost my father-in-law and my mother 8 days apart. And we were thrust into a middle of two estates, one more complicated than the other, but nonetheless, we didn't really know what to do. My wife and I were the youngest each in our families, and we had to just grind through it and figure it out, whether it was Veterans Affairs or whether it was state of Massachusetts, and real estate involved as well. And again, as I said, we didn't really know where to turn. So we muddled our way through that. And it was back then in 2017 that I actually started doing it on a volunteer basis. I was helping other people that I know had lost loved ones, and their estates were being dragged into probate. And again, same thing. Everybody's a little bit lost.
And this is after you experienced what you experienced.
Right? Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was just helping people, and it felt really good, of course, to help people. And then slowly but surely, I was just presented with properties because maybe the widow needs to sell the home and move it to something smaller. So that was my segue. But then I really started focusing a little bit more in the past year or so on wholesaling properties, just being that middleman to go identify and source. My focus is off market properties. And then, but it's opening me up to do different things, whether it's a development or whether it's new construction or whether it's just clean up a place and put it back on the market. I wouldn't be able to do that myself alone because I don't have the resources. But as being a wholesaler, it opened up an opportunity to me to work with a lot of different people.
Now, with Blue Legacy, one of the things that you mentioned was the respectful disposition of household contents. So as you got into helping folks with their estates, it looks like you're doing a little bit more than just real estate. You're actually looking at a whole package, it sounds like.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like a therapist.
At a very difficult time in many folks' lives.
Absolutely. And I have that in me, that just innate ability to connect with people. And again, a genuine willingness to help people.
Yeah.
And now you have to balance that with a business, but literally more often than not, I run into hoarder house situations. And that's just an example. That's just an example. I said the delicate disposition of assets. Someone thinks that they have a treasure there and they want me to help them sell it. And I'm bringing in one of my estate sale gurus and they're like, this isn't really worth much. So how do you balance that? So again,
you did mention digging into long forgotten boxes. Have you ever found anything really strange or very valuable or anything weird?
Not really. I think, let me put a little context to that as well, because it is important. When I say diving into these boxes, that ties directly into the probate component of what I do. Because a lot of time, a family member will have a strong box tucked away in the corner in the closet somewhere. And the old school is don't touch that until I'm gone. There's information in there.
Right.
And then after the person dies, you open that box and you're expecting it to provide answers, and all it does is provide more questions. Because you'll find things in there like expired life insurance policies.
Oh, wow.
And you'll find handwritten policy numbers, and you don't even know the insurance company. Or maybe it's not even an insurance policy, maybe it's a retirement plan. That was the reference to the boxes, really sitting with the family at the kitchen table and triaging, I like to call it triaging documents, helping them prepare to meet with an attorney.
And you could even find a key to a safe deposit box, but you don't know what bank it goes to.
100%. I guess the thought process is, do you really want to pay a lawyer at their rates to do that type of work? Because again, a lot of it is really consoling and working with people and working them through just the mess that's been created over the last bunch of years.
And this business is one that, and you started this business, it's going now and it's off the ground and it's helping a lot of families. And along the way, you're also getting a lot of real estate and helping them get rid of properties they don't want to deal with, I would imagine. Right?
Absolutely. Out of state heirs is a big thing. So I really focus on that. Any out of state heirs. So they're a personal representative for an estate, and yet they live in California.
Do you ever have a case where I don't even know the guy? He was my uncle, but I don't even know him. But I inherited his house.
You get a little bit of that. I do. Not too much to the point where I don't know them. They know there's a property involved, so they're usually very chipper and they're ready to move forward with something. But yeah, I have had some distant people. It was my uncle, and then sometimes you can't find people at all, which is a real challenge trying to contact heirs and things like that.
So this is pretty much a specialty business. Are there a lot of others doing this around the country that you know of?
I got to tell you, in the Boston area, I don't really know anyone really doing it. Maybe one other person who does this, but not really many people. So it's a great service, even for attorneys and realtors. So if oftentimes a realtor's going to sell a home, this happens in Boston a lot. This happens in affluent markets. People are in a home, they relocate, and they don't really care what's going on in the house. They just know they need to sell and get out. Right. And I mentioned affluent markets because they'll just leave everything behind.
I've heard stories like that.
Yeah, and whose job does it end up being? It ends up being the realtor's job because they want the listing. And the realtor doesn't want it. They don't want to do that either.
Oh
so
my gosh.
Yeah, it's a lot of networking and just trying to provide a service for people that need it.
So you've got that business, but you also have your regular real estate business that you're running as well, and you work these two side by side. So what does a work week look like for you?
So again, I do dovetail the two things together. Okay. Because in most circumstances, because I think it's a little bit of a softer approach as opposed to knocking on someone's door, which I'll clarify that in a minute, or making a phone call, a cold call. And a lot of the guys and gals I work with, they'll just call up and say, hey, we're interested in buying your house. I get those calls all the time. We're interested in buying your house. And the response is, well, get in line because you're the 10th phone call I've had this week. So when I dovetail that with Blue Legacy Estate Services, it's a little bit of a softer and a different approach. I explain to them just what I explained to you, that this is what we do. This is how we help families. In addition, we also buy and sell our own real estate. So it's a little softer. I can get them to not hang up the phone,
Right.
or I can get them to open the door, and then I can talk to them about the best way to proceed if they truly are selling the house. You had originally asked me, what does a typical day consist of? So I make a lot of phone calls each day. I have somebody scour the Massachusetts court's website, and they dump into a spreadsheet the new filings for probate. So every day I'm typically making phone calls, whether it's to probate leads. I also usually 2 or 3 times a week, I want to be out in the field, whether that's knocking residential doors, and I'll literally pick a neighborhood, or I'll run a list of, let's say, houses where people have been in the house for 50 years. I'll pull a list. This is something I started doing over the last 3 months or so, where I was avoiding this initially. I'll find properties that are owned within a trust. And my first thought was it's very difficult to get through to that because it's in a trust and sometimes it's camouflaged and you don't know who owns it. That said,
Sure.
it's more difficult for everybody else to find it too. And then most people aren't going to take the time to go out and knock the doors. So again, just to continue on with your original question, whether I'm knocking doors, trying to meet attorneys, whether I'm meeting realtors, whether I'm going to senior centers, just trying to get the word out there.
It's certainly fascinating. It sounds like a total niche market that you've discovered. And I hate to say you're an expert in this field. I'm sure people are maybe seek you out.
Yeah, we're getting there. That's all a process. I'll be truthful with you. I always say you need a lot of marketing dollars to have people knock your door down, right? Through the
Right.
internet. But through attorneys and realtors, that's a
Well,
different story.
you're getting a lot of word of mouth
Yeah.
business, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it, really.
Let me switch gears. Tell us about your first deal when you bought a place in Florida, and 20 years ago.
Yeah. So that was an interesting scenario. So it was a developer building on a street, whatever it was, right? Development. And at the end of the project, he bailed out. So he left this project, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen houses left. So I went in, I bought that house down there. It wasn't totally finished. All the rough was done. It was sheetrocked. There were no floors. So we went in, we finished the house. And then I said, I'm going to keep this. So this was back in
Yeah.
2006, 7, 8. I said,
Right.
I'm going to keep this. So I put a renter in there. I had a property management company. And then a lot of the, I'm going to call it normal stuff that happens when you own property.
Right.
The people stopped paying rent. They just chose, we're not going to pay rent. And I had to have them evicted. Then it was getting another tenant in there. It was just back and forth. I ended up having, like, over a short period of time, let's say probably 2 years, 2 or 3 years, I had, I don't know, maybe three or four tenants. And then finally I was done. That was when the market crashed,
Right.
2008. And I was just lucky to get out from under the house in the end.
And
Go ahead.
you were up in New Hampshire. Did you have a property manager down?
I had a property manager down there in Florida. Yeah. This was in Kissimmee, Florida, outside of Orlando. So again, when you look at it on paper, it's all good. Yeah, just get a property management company. Just do this. I'll be clear to everybody on the call. So much of this stuff, like when you sit in on these trainings and these webinars and these seminars, man, you can't miss. You can't miss. We have the proven formula, A, B, C, D. And then you get in the real world. And for those, on the call that are investing and whatnot, you realize things don't go according to plan. And even when they do, they oftentimes change. So that was that experience down in Florida. Yeah.
I think you talk about that later on about being patient and consistent with your
Yeah.
business dealings, and also
That's the biggest thing. I say that over and over for people that are just getting started, and for people who have been, I'll just say, grinding it out for 2, 3, 4 years. It's easy to quit, right? It's easy to
Right.
want to quit because you look at it and you're putting in a lot of work. The great thing, and I'll just frame that by saying you put in a lot of work, but I put the work in on my time, on my schedule. But staying consistent. Just I'll say one more thing about consistency, and I mentioned about going in the field.
Yeah.
When you're in the field, just good things happen. You just stumble onto things. And you go into 50 Main Street to knock that door specifically because you have some intel. And next thing they tell you, but the lady across the street died, and the kids don't live around here, and they don't want that house. They all have their own house. So that's the consistency, just getting out for me in the field.
Well, I don't know if Tony Youngs is on this call, but I've heard those stories from Tony Youngs talking about knocking on doors and finding properties that way. That's fascinating.
It is, and it's. I've been knocking doors for a long time, and it still fascinates me because, like I say, you're looking for one thing over here, and next thing you know, you end up with this over here.
Right.
A lot of times, that's the quiet stuff that nobody talks about. You know,
When we talked back in the late summer, early fall, you had two properties under contract in Bedford and Brookline. Are you still working on those?
Bedford closed. Bedford
Okay.
closed, which was great. So that's going to be a tear down. That's going to
Okay.
be a tear down. One of the other things I mentioned in the article too is trying to work in high value towns.
Right.
So Bedford, Massachusetts is a high value town. So, you know, you can take down a house. You could pay $550,000 for a tear down. So I don't know where everybody's from on the phone call, but that's buying a house and tearing it down, just to repeat. But then you have the opportunity to turn around and build. It's probably going to be about a $1.75 million house.
Oh, wow.
So you have enough of a spread to make it work. Brookline, on the other hand, Brookline fell apart. And I'll tell you what happened with Brookline. This is another interesting story. Brookline was literally, we were closing that week. We were closing on a Friday. And on Tuesday, it just blew up. And reason is we kept finding things wrong, things that were going to stop us. So Brookline was a partially constructed house. I don't have to say anything else other than the homeowner brought in a house kit, and it's called SIP construction. So it's insulated panels.
Huh.
They're structural panels. So it's almost like, just picture it like two pieces of sheathing, an inside and an outside, and there's insulation panels in between. So it all goes together. I call it a kit. He did all his own work, him and his buddies. He used shark bites throughout the house for the plumbing.
Oh, boy.
So we knew a lot of this going in. So it's okay, we're going to replace all the plumbing. We're not going to put our name on a house that has shark bites. And then right up until the end, we were overcoming hurdles. And then it just got to the point where the building inspector, we were trying to get, let me stop and think a second. We were trying to get the building inspector to sign off, and we wanted Eversource, the utility company, to energize the property, right?
Yeah.
So we could
Right.
get that certification. Eversource wouldn't sign off. Anyways, it just kept going back and forth. And finally, it was like, we're closing on Friday. These things are not happening. And it was just mutual. The seller was getting really nervous, and we're just like, we're done. We walked away.
All those red flags, and finally the last red flag got you, and you're like, nope, we can't do this.
That's what was really frustrating about that, because I started at one number with this seller, and then by the time we were approaching closing, we were, what was I, $125,000 lower than where we started. Okay. And just like you said, we were knocking down these hurdles saying, okay, we got this. The
Right.
wetlands issue, we got that. And it just got to the point where it blew up. And that was really frustrating, because a word to the wise, it consumed me. It was an hour and 5 minutes from my house. And especially at the beginning, I was the one driving back and forth. And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't really know how I would have done that differently. Something I think of, what would I have done differently? Because if we could have pulled it off at the prices we had it on the contract at, it would have been a solid deal. So I don't know. I really didn't figure that one out.
We hear over and over again those life lessons that investors learn. They've been there, done that, or they bought the property that just took them down. but they were able to rise back up, or they saw the
Yeah.
red flags. This is why when you go to a REIA meeting, and as you said, mentoring and learning education is all key in your real estate journey. But when you go to a REIA meeting, you meet investors who've been there, done that, who have these stories like
Yeah.
you're sharing right now. It's I've heard so many stories from people, and you just like, oh my God.
It's staggering. It's
Yeah.
staggering. And again, this is one of the reasons I opted to stick at this point with wholesaling as opposed to taking things over the finish line, because obviously wholesaling, I've insulated myself. The risk is a
Right.
lot less than if I'm going in and having a rehab or tear down a house. I've seen people get into houses. They think it's going to cost them $150,000 to rehab the place. They take down the walls and they look and they say, "Oh, this is structural." And then once something like that happens on a specific property, it's tough to rebound. One of the guys in my local group, same thing. He had a house in a local market here. And he literally, I said, I just saw him last week. I said, "Did you sell the house?" And he said, "No, we took it off the market."
Oh, wow.
I'm like, "What?" They took it off the market just because it had been sitting, and it just,
And that's money. That's money, resources tied up in
yeah,
that facility.
yeah, it's challenging.
Well, I'm going to switch gears again a little bit more. What advice or tip would you like to pass along to investors? If there's one thing you can pass along.
I would say I'm going to give you two things, Brad. Sorry, I
Yep.
know you asked for
That's
one,
okay.
but they're quick. Don't forget why you're working the business. You
Right.
really have to have a goal and an objective as to why you're doing this business, right? If it's just to make a lot of money, I don't know. I can show you some other ways to make a lot of money, right? You have to have a passion for it. You have to be clear on what it is. And like I mentioned to you earlier, I love this flexibility. A lot of times people say to me, "Why don't you become a realtor?" Because I don't want a homeowner telling me when I need to meet them at a house
Right.
if I'm with my family and I have to drop what I'm doing because I have to go show this house. So understand why you're doing the business. And then the other thing is just be consistent. Don't quit. Have a plan, work the plan, and don't quit.
With Blue Legacy Services, your heart's in the right place. You're providing, like you said, therapy, but a relief and of a burden that a lot of families have had, and it's based on a lot of your own experiences that you had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, that's the real key, right? I don't BS people.
Yeah.
I tell people what is what you get, and if you like me, let's work together, and if you don't, let's not. I don't want to be one of these people that are just stringing people along with misinformation or whatnot.
Now, I'm going to switch gears again. Your son got married in Italy last year.
Yeah.
And you went to the wedding in Italy. So how was that?
Yeah. That was crazy. I never thought one of my kids would have got married in Italy.
Do you have family? Do you have family in Italy? Your Maggio's Italian.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell that story because when I do, I get emotional and it takes too long.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll say this. I met cousins on my last day in Italy who some of them I haven't seen. And the couple that I have seen, it's been 50 years.
Wow.
And I was brought there by a stranger on a 3-hour journey to get there in the hills. Wow. So I had to blurt that out. But back to the whole experience in Italy for a wedding. If you're able to do that because you got the whole dynamics of the family. My sisters didn't come, that was not good. So you're missing some people, but I still highly recommend it.
That's awesome.
It was a lot less money for my wife and for my son and his wife, and the experience just being there was phenomenal.
I can't imagine. I've seen all the Italian weddings on TV, and as everybody else has, I cannot imagine what it must be like in real life.
Yeah, this was pretty good. It was a good time.
Speaking of time, we have run out of time today on the quarter